They said it was just another comet, a frozen traveler drifting through the dark between stars. But when the James Webb Space Telescope turned its golden mirrors toward 3I Atlas, what it saw changed everything. Before we go deeper into this, make sure you subscribe, because once you hear what NASA's newest data reveals, you may never look at our sun the same way again. It started as a simple observation. Webb was supposed to capture infrared reflections from an interstellar object passing through our system. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a rock. It was breathing. Its glow flickered in patterns, not randomly, but rhythmically, like a slow, pulsing heartbeat drifting across millions of miles. The telescope's sensors detected temperature spikes that rose and fell with mathematical precision. Each pulse lasted exactly 7 minutes and 51 seconds, then repeated. That rhythm doesn't belong to nature. At first, NASA engineers dismissed it as a glitch interference, solar flare noise, or maybe Webb's infrared sensors reacting to charged dust. But Webb's data doesn't lie. Each pulse carries structure harmonics buried inside the light curve, as though the object itself were sending coded signals through heat. And that wasn't even the strangest part. When Webb zoomed in, it saw that the object wasn't tumbling randomly like most comets. It was stabilizing itself, as if it were adjusting course. Astronomers ran the numbers again and again, and they couldn't explain it. 3I Atlas was maintaining orientation relative to the Sun, tilting ever so slightly with each pass like a spacecraft correcting its trajectory. Still, NASA said nothing. The data was quietly sent to the Deep Space Network, encrypted under a new internal label, Spectral Class Anomaly. Only a handful of people knew what it really meant. And then, right before it slipped behind the Sun, the moment when we'd lose sight of it completely, Webb caught one final image. That's when everything changed. Under its surface dust and gas, Webb detected metallic geometry symmetrical ridges arranged like plates or panels. They weren't random fractures. They were designed. Scientists at first thought they were seeing shadows or reflection errors until the data returned the same pattern from multiple angles. 3I Atlas wasn't just reflecting sunlight. It was absorbing it, converting it, using it. For days, the telescope continued to record faint blue emissions from the object's dark side energy being released deliberately in pulses. The object wasn't dead matter. It was active. Somewhere, deep within NASA's private network, analysts began to whisper what everyone feared but refused to say aloud. What if 3I Atlas wasn't natural at all? What if it was built hours before the object moved behind the Sun, entering what astronomers call the blind zone, where all observation becomes impossible? The James Webb Telescope registered something else. A burst of energy from the object aimed straight toward our star. Not a random flare, but a precise beam, narrow, concentrated, and timed perfectly with the object's rotation. It wasn't just passing by the Sunday, it was interacting with it. After that moment, the transmission stopped. Webb's sensors went quiet, and for nearly 3 minutes, Every data feed connected to the telescope froze. Then the system rebooted itself. No error logs, no radiation spikes, just blank silence. That night, NASA locked the raw data behind restricted access, but not before a few leaked screenshots slipped through internal channels showing strange infrared filaments stretching between the sun and the object, as if something invisible connected them. Something alive. Now, with the latest James Webb updates released quietly under scientific jargon, independent analysts are starting to piece together what really happened during those 3 minutes of silence and why what Webb found may be far worse than anyone expected. Because what looked like a comet might actually be a message. And the sun might not have been the only thing it touched. When the James Webb team finally restored control of the telescope, the first thing they noticed wasn't the missing data. It was the silence. No radiation spikes, no background noise, no solar echo at all. The void around the sun, usually alive with electromagnetic activity, was still. Like something had absorbed every trace of energy for just a moment. Then slowly the solar hum returned, but different, slightly off frequency. At first, it seemed harmless. But when they ran Fourier analysis on the returning signal, they found something that made every scientist in the room go quiet. The sun was now pulsing ever so slightly at the same 7-minute rhythm that had come from 3I Atlas. It was as if the sun had been tuned. The news didn't reach the public, of course. NASA downplayed it as instrument recalibration errors. But within classified communication logs, astronomers referred to the event as the synchronization. James Webb's next observation window was scheduled to begin weeks later. But something unusual happened sooner, something that caught the attention of radio observatories all around the world. Shortwave operators in Canada, Finland, and Japan started reporting faint rhythmic distortions in the 3 MHz band. Weak but persistent. At first, it was dismissed as atmospheric interference, until someone noticed the exact same pattern repeating in the ultraviolet range of frequency Webb had detected from 3I Atlas itself. By then, a few insiders at NASA began to connect the dots. The rhythm wasn't fading, it was spreading. Not just through light, but through magnetic fields. Across several observatories, the solar wind readings began showing ripples that matched the pattern. It wasn't random turbulence, it was organized waves moving with purpose, almost alive. Even the Parker Solar Probe, orbiting dangerously close to the sun, began transmitting strange telemetry. Instruments meant to measure plasma flow started returning non-linear feedback, like the probe was being interfered with by a controlled signal. One engineer described it best in a leaked interview. It's greater than. It's like something whispered into the solar wind, and the wind listened. Back at the James Webb Mission Control, they ran thermal reconstructions of the sun's surface using all available telescopic data. What they found wasn't a solar flare or coronal mass ejection. It was a heat signature, circular, perfectly defined, expanding outwards from one precise point on the solar equator. That point matched the exact coordinates where 3I Atlas disappeared. The signature wasn't random. It followed geometry. a spiral mathematical, clean, elegant, a Fibonacci pattern. Nature uses Fibonacci sequences all the time, in shells, in flowers, in hurricanes, but not in plasma, not in a nuclear furnace that burns hydrogen at millions of degrees. Something had imprinted order into chaos. Days later, NASA's data servers began filling with error logs from satellites. Not mechanical errors, logic mismatches. Telemetry packets were arriving from old satellites, some long decommissioned, transmitting at new frequencies they were never designed for. When engineers opened the signals, they didn't contain coordinates or status updates. They contained numbers, endless strings of prime numbers. It was almost as if those dead satellites had been awakened, repurposed, and were now speaking in the same mathematical rhythm as the Sunday. That's when it became clear. The synchronization wasn't just solar. It was systemic. Earth's magnetic field started echoing the same faint oscillations, measurable at deep ocean observatories and polar research stations. Every compass on the planet drifted off true north by a fraction of a degree. Still, the official explanation stayed the same: unusual solar activity. But those who read the classified data knew the truth. The pulse that began from 3I Atlas was now inside everything: the wind, the oceans, even our power grids. The James Webb Telescope, still collecting faint background infrared data, recorded one last anomaly before NASA quietly shut down its public observation feed for maintenance. In the blackness behind the sun, faintly illuminated by reflected radiation, something enormous shimmered a structure, thin and angular, stretching thousands of kilometers across. Like a dark wing cutting through the void, it wasn't visible in optical light, only infrared, and it wasn't stationary, it was moving. The object drifted for hours before vanishing completely, but not before Webb detected a final flash, a single burst of energy identical to the one 3I Atlas emitted days before. Scientists called it an echo, but others called it what they truly believed it was: a response. The world didn't know it yet, but the sun had started whispering, and James Webb was the first to hear it. After weeks of silence, NASA's internal data archives suddenly came alive again, auto-generated pings from Webb's deep space memory cache. At first, they thought it was just delayed telemetry syncing from the last observation cycle. But then they realized something was wrong. The data wasn't coming from Webb's last known coordinates. It was coming from elsewhere. The signals carried Webb's own ID tag, its digital fingerprint, but they were being received from the opposite direction behind the Sunday. It was as if something had copied the telescope's identity and was now talking in its place. Inside the packet headers, scientists discovered short fragments of binary data that didn't match any known communication pattern. They weren't random bits. They were sequences recursive, fractal, self-referencing, a kind of digital DNA. It repeated in structures eerily similar to base pair coding, except there was a fifth element, something that didn't correspond to adenine, thymine, cytosine, or guanine. It was like the pattern had evolved a rewritten version of life itself, encoded not in carbon, but in light. This wasn't just a message. It was an invitation. When decoded through waveform mapping, the sequence produced a haunting resonance, a tone so pure, so mathematically perfect, that it matched the natural Schumann resonance of Earth's atmosphere. Whatever sent it knew our planet intimately. And here's where things took a darker turn. A few of the scientists studying the waveform noticed unusual side effects. Their lab equipment began malfunctioning. Hard drives wiped. Sensors miscalibrated. But most disturbing of all, their neural monitoring headsets used to track stress and focus recorded synchronized brainwave spikes exactly when the tone played. That meant it wasn't just a sound. It was interacting with them. Word spread quietly among the research teams. One researcher described it as feeling like the signal was learning, mapping them, adapting, embedding itself in their instruments, and perhaps, somehow, their minds. Soon, James Webb's next data dump arrived. Except this time, there were no images, no light curves, just patterns repeating across every layer of the transmission. When they plotted the numbers in 3D spectrograms, something formed an image made not of light, but of resonance. A shape, smooth, symmetrical, alien. It looked almost like an eye. The same spiral geometry detected on the sun's surface was now appearing in Webb's internal memory. The telescope wasn't just recording the anomaly anymore, it was part of it. Meanwhile, global observatories began reporting strange electromagnetic surges that followed the rhythm of the signal. The pulses weren't coming from space anymore. They were rising from the Earth itself. In Antarctica, the neutrino detectors at the Ice Cube Observatory started lighting up. Neutrinos, ghost particles that rarely interact with matter, were streaming upward from beneath the ice. The source? Unknown. But their energy signature matched the same harmonic frequencies detected from 3I Atlas weeks before. Somehow, whatever was inside that object had bridged the gap between stars and found resonance inside our own planet. Not a signal from space anymore, but a reflection of something now within. The James Webb team tried isolating the anomalous data into quarantine servers, but each time they did, new corrupted logs appeared, lines of code rewriting themselves in real time. At one point, an engineer described it as the data trying to complete itself. And when they finally managed to render the full 3D structure of the resonance map, what emerged on the screen froze the entire lab. It wasn't random noise. It was a map, a topological pattern that overlapped perfectly with the sun's magnetic field lines and Earth. The signal wasn't just communication. It was connection. Somehow, 3I Atlas had synchronized the energy fields of two celestial bodies, the sun and the Earth, into one continuous network. And buried in that network was the same heartbeat Webb had first detected. Slower now, but stronger, almost alive. At this point, NASA wasn't the only one watching. The European Space Agency, JAXA, and even private firms like SpaceX quietly redirected instruments toward the sun's corona, hoping to pick up what Webb had found. They didn't have to wait long. A second pulse appeared fainter, more distant, coming from the same trajectory where 3I Atlas should have been, but slightly off course. It was moving, changing direction, like it was looking for something, or perhaps heading back. By the time November came, the sun no longer looked the same. Images from solar telescopes revealed faint filaments stretching out from the corona, twisting threads of plasma, forming symmetrical arcs that no one could explain. They weren't random loops. They were patterns. It was as if something was weaving inside the Sunday. NASA tried to keep the data quiet, but the images leaked anyway. Amateur astronomers noticed them first strange glowing structures in SOHO's raw feed, symmetrical shapes rotating in harmony with solar rotation. Each time the sun completed a turn, the shapes would shift slightly, almost like gears inside a machine. But the real fear began when those patterns started appearing in Earth's magnetosphere. Satellites orbiting high above the atmosphere began reporting phantom signals, guidance systems slightly off, gyroscopes drifting. The patterns weren't random. They followed the same mathematical intervals recorded from 3I Atlas months earlier. At first, it was subtle, a few communication blackouts, minor GPS distortions. But then, one night, something happened that no one could explain. The magnetospheric multi-scale mission, a cluster of 4 NASA satellites designed to study Earth's magnetic field, detected a massive pulse of electromagnetic energy, strong enough to trigger automatic shutdowns across all 4 spacecraft simultaneously. When the systems rebooted, their orientation data showed something impossible. All 4 satellites, each separated by hundreds of kilometers, had rotated in unison, exactly 33 degrees toward the Sunday. It was as if something had aligned them. Meanwhile, down on Earth, the auroras began changing color. What had once been gentle green curtains of light became laced with red and deep indigo, flickering like veins of living fire across the night sky. In Alaska, researchers reported waves of crimson auroras pulsating in rhythm 7 minutes and 51 seconds apart. The same rhythm that began with 3I Atlas. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was transmission. By now, most of the James Webb team had been reassigned. Officially, it was part of a rotational restructuring. In truth, NASA was isolating anyone who had direct access to the anomalous data. But they couldn't stop the leaks. One of the engineers, under an anonymous username, began posting fragments of decoded telemetry on the dark web. Each post contained only numbers raw, meaningless at first glance, but when analysts mapped them visually, a shape emerged, a structure, triangular, hollow at the center, positioned exactly between the Earth and the Sun, the point of perfect gravitational balance known as the L1 Lagrange point. That's where the James Webb Space Telescope itself was orbiting. But the coordinates didn't match Webb's position. They pointed to something else, something larger. When radio telescopes were redirected toward those coordinates, they picked up a faint resonance. Not static, but a repeating tone, faint yet deliberate, hidden beneath the solar noise. At first, scientists thought it was Webb's own reflection. its heat signature bouncing through space. But then the resonance shifted, responding to the telescope's movement. Whatever it wasn't reflecting. It was watching. Further analysis revealed faint shadows crossing between Webb and the Sun, thin, geometrically perfect lines moving against the solar wind. It was impossible for debris to behave like that. Something was there, invisible to normal optics, but very much real. Over the next days, multiple deep space observatories began to report the same thing. Strange interference whenever their instruments pointed toward L1. Even the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, which had been running for decades, began picking up symmetrical distortions in its coronagraph feed. And then came the image. A deep stack composite taken by Webb's mid-infrared camera revealed the faint outline of a vast structure hovering at L1. Smooth, circular, its surface reflecting almost nothing. It appeared to be made of something darker than space itself, a void against the void. The structure wasn't drifting. It was anchored in a perfect gravitational pocket between Earth and Sun, silent, unseen, waiting. The object's scale was staggering, at least 10 times the size of the International Space Station. Its form unmistakably artificial, and worse, it wasn't alone. Behind it, 3 smaller objects could be seen moving in formation, equidistant, like sentinels orbiting their master. Within days, the James Webb Control Center received an encrypted transmission labeled Priority Override. It wasn't from NASA headquarters. It came from inside the telescope itself. The message contained a single line of text. No metadata, no timestamp, no author. Is greater than we are not observing it anymore. It's observing us. After that, the live feed from Webb was taken offline. Officially, it was due to thermal recalibration. But those who had seen the last transmission knew the truth. The telescope had captured something that wasn't supposed to exist. And whatever it was, it had noticed us first. The first sign that something was changing came quietly. It wasn't an explosion or a flare, it was light. A thin, steady pulse of red and blue began flickering from the sun's outer edge. Not a solar storm, not radiation, but something rhythmic, deliberate. At first, scientists thought it was a magnetic inversion. The sun flips its poles every 11 years, a natural cycle. But this wasn't that. The colors weren't random plasma shifts. They were patterned. James Webb's last remaining instruments captured it perfectly, alternating red and blue bands, flashing at exact intervals. The frequency was identical to the 3i Atlas resonance. Someone or something was using the sun as a transmitter. NASA classified the data within hours, labeling it under thermal anomaly optical layer contamination. But a few astronomers outside the agency caught it too. And unlike NASA, they didn't stay silent. In Chile, an amateur radio astronomer named Armin Koller recorded the light pattern and converted the wavelength shifts into sound. What he heard was haunting a low pulsing tone with harmonics that matched the Fibonacci ratio. Every 5th pulse was slightly longer than the last, almost like a countdown. He posted the audio online, and within hours it spread everywhere. The clip became known as the solar heartbeat. But there was something else, a faint second frequency hidden beneath the main tone. When isolated, the secondary tone formed a new pattern, binary, and when decoded, it revealed a simple message: echo confirmed. That phrase sent shockwaves through the astrophysics community. Echo confirmed. Was it a response from 3i Atlas? Or was it something inside the sun replying back? At the same time, solar observatories across the globe began picking up intense particle bursts from the corona. But here's the impossible part. The bursts were traveling inward, not outward. It was as if the sun was drawing energy into itself. For a star that's supposed to only emit, this was impossible. Something was feeding on it. Meanwhile, deep-sea magnetometers on Earth began spiking again. The same pulse from the solar heartbeat was now measurable in oceanic current flows. The planet's own magnetic field was resonating in sync, a global echo chamber of energy. Across several regions, Iceland, Alaska, and even northern China, the auroras changed again. No longer soft ribbons of light, but vertical shafts, beams of red and blue stretching straight into the sky, bending ever so slightly toward the Sunday, like the planet was responding, calling back. Then came the event that changed everything. On November 29th, the Solar Dynamics Observatory recorded an unprecedented flare sequence, twin arcs of energy rising from opposite poles of the Sunday. Instead of erupting outward like normal flares, they bent inward, merging into a massive vortex in the sun's equator. And at the heart of that vortex, a shadow, not dark because of absence of light, but because light itself refused to escape it. The shadow began expanding, slowly at first, then faster, until, for exactly 8 minutes, the sun dimmed by 2%. It was enough to be measurable from Earth. People around the world noticed the daylight flicker, a strange, cold stillness sweeping across continents. Plants wilted slightly. Birds went silent. For 8 minutes, the sun felt artificial. And when the light returned, it brought something with it. All satellites in near-Earth orbit reported a synchronized transmission, a brief, high-frequency burst carrying Webb's own telemetry ID. But Webb wasn't transmitting. Its systems had been offline for weeks. The signal came through it. NASA's Deep Space Tracking Network logged the pulse as originating from the L1 point, the same region where the dark structure was discovered. For 11 seconds, the structure glowed bright blue, then faded completely, vanishing from all sensors. And in the silence that followed, one final echo returned to Earth, a single repeating binary sequence detected by ground stations across 5 continents. Decoded, it read, "Assimilation complete." No one knows what that means. Not really. But soon after, strange electromagnetic fluctuations began sweeping across the globe. Subtle, rhythmic, predictable. Some believed it was solar interference. Others thought it was the beginning of synchronization, the merging of Earth's energy field with something larger, older, and not human. And somewhere, behind the veil of official silence, the James Webb team received a private communication, a final, encrypted message tagged with Webb's original identifier. When decrypted, it wasn't data. It was a voice, a human voice, distorted, calm, saying only one thing. Is greater than, it's awake. At first, it seemed like nothing had changed. The world carried on, traffic lights blinking, planes flying, people scrolling through their phones. But underneath it all, something invisible had begun to hum. Around the world, magnetic readings started fluctuating at an impossible frequency, 7.83 Hz, the exact base resonance of Earth's electromagnetic field. Only now, it wasn't constant anymore. It was pulsing. The pattern matched the solar heartbeat, red, blue, red, repeating every 11 minutes, perfectly synchronized with the sun's new rhythm. In Alaska, a group of geomagnetic researchers noticed something terrifying. Their sensors weren't just detecting Earth's field, they were detecting another one. A second, faint magnetic wave overlaid the planet like a ghost field, identical in shape but delayed by half a second. It was as if Earth had a shadow, a mirror version of itself made of pure energy. And that was only the beginning. Power grids across several nations began tripping without warning, not because of overload, but because the system's internal oscillations suddenly matched the frequency of the pulse. Anything electronic, anything built to resonate, began vibrating in rhythm with the signal. Radio operators described the interference as alive. When they tuned across frequencies, the static would follow them, adjusting pitch, adapting, almost like it was listening back. And then came the whispers. It started with satellite technicians. They claimed to hear faint voices within their headsets when no one else was transmitting. At first, people blamed faulty equipment or overlapping channels, but the voices grew clearer and stranger, not human, slow, layered, harmonically perfect, like dozens of tones speaking at once, forming words that no one could quite understand. One NASA operator, later interviewed anonymously, said the voices weren't speaking to them, they were speaking through them. He described moments of complete blankness, as if something had borrowed his thoughts for a fraction of a second, rearranged them, then returned them. And when he snapped out of it, the console lights would flash red and blue, the same pulse, always the same. As reports spread, psychological anomalies began appearing across the population. People started dreaming of the Sunday, not its light, but its surface. They described it as being covered in living veins of color, red and blue streams that moved like blood. Every dream ended the same way, a single eye opening at the center of the Sunday. The phrase, "it's awake," took on a new meaning. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was confirmation. Meanwhile, deep beneath NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, an encrypted meeting was taking place. Only a handful of individuals were allowed inside, all wearing biometric filters to prevent exposure to the anomalous frequencies. In the center of the table was a single drive labeled Webb B 321A. The recovered recording, it wasn't supposed to exist. The telescope had gone silent weeks ago, but this drive contained one final transmission, a backup recorded automatically by a ground relay before the feed was terminated. The recording began with static faint hissing, almost like breathing. Then came the data stream. incomprehensible numbers cascading like rainfall. And within it, the same voice that had haunted the technicians. This time it spoke clearly. Is greater than 3i Atlas, is not a rock. It was sent. And now the sun remembers. The room fell silent. The waveform in the recording wasn't just audio, it contained spectral data. Hidden inside the sound was a visual pattern, a helix, red and blue intertwined, perfectly mirroring the structure of DNA. But it wasn't human DNA. It matched nothing ever recorded. Some believed it was a code, the genetic signature of whatever intelligence created the object. Others feared it was something else, a viral blueprint, an infection for stars. The next morning, every telescope aimed at the sun recorded something unprecedented. A dark ring formed around its equator, faint, shifting, metallic in nature. For 37 minutes, the sun appeared to ripple like something massive was moving beneath its surface. When the distortion cleared, the sun returned to normal brightness, but its spectral signature had changed. It was now emitting a frequency that matched human brainwaves. Doctors around the world began reporting cases of spontaneous synesthesia, people seeing colors when they heard sound, tasting metal when they saw light, feeling emotions that weren't their own. Humanity, it seemed, was being tuned, and deep within NASA's archives, a hidden transmission continued to pulse, undetected by the public, unfiltered by any firewall. Its message repeated endlessly, line after line, across every server, every relay, every satellite that had ever connected to Webb. Is greater than we have synchronized. Is greater than the awakening is complete. It began quietly, the kind of silence that hums before a storm. For the first time in recorded history, Earth's atmosphere began to shimmer. Satellites captured faint waves of distortion moving across the upper layers, like ripples spreading through invisible water. The air itself was vibrating. Scientists called it resonant refracting, but no one really understood it. The pulse from the sun, that strange red-blue pattern, had changed again. It was no longer consistent. It had started to speak. The pulse frequencies now carried modulation, structured pauses, and harmonic overtones as if encoded with information. Some even believed it was language. And as the pulse evolved, so did the planet. The first changes were subtle. Compasses spun off by a single degree, then 3. Clocks began losing seconds without reason. GPS systems across several continents showed Earth's rotation slowing not enough to notice day to day, but enough for astronomers to panic. And then came the weather. The polar jet stream fractured, splitting into strange looping spirals that drifted over continents like torn ribbons of air. Thunderstorms appeared where skies had been clear minutes before. Lightning began striking upward into space. Some thought it was coincidence. Others called it feedback. But one thing was clear. Whatever was happening in the sun, Earth was responding. Then came the night the stars moved. At first, astronomers thought it was sensor drift. But when the same anomaly appeared across multiple telescopes, from Chile to South Africa to Japan, it became undeniable. The constellations were warping. The stars themselves hadn't moved, but the space between them had. Like a lens being twisted from the inside out, in some images, Faint red filaments appeared stretching across the sky, barely visible, like threads of glowing silk weaving through the constellations. They pulsed with the same rhythm as the solar heartbeat. NASA's Deep Space Network tried to lock onto the Webb telescope again. Nothing. But then, for 8 seconds, an unknown signal broke through. The transmission didn't contain data or voice. It contained time. Atomic clocks synchronized to the network suddenly jumped ahead exactly 13 minutes and 13 seconds. It was as if the future had leaked through the signal. Meanwhile, on the surface, strange gravitational fluctuations began. Objects, even small ones, started to defy microgravity expectations. Drops of water hanging in the air slightly longer before falling, dust floating unpredictably, pendulums swinging beyond their normal arc. Physicists were speechless. The only explanation they could give, the gravitational constant, something that should never change, was fluctuating. In one chilling experiment, CERN's magnet detectors recorded a faint oscillation in quantum vacuum density synchronized, once again, with a solar pulse. That shouldn't be possible. The vacuum itself was breathing, and then it got personal. People began feeling it, not all at once, but gradually. It started with headaches, then waves of vertigo that came and went like tides. Sleep patterns collapsed. Dreams became vivid, connected. Thousands reported seeing the same image, a vast, luminous sphere, burning red and blue, hovering beyond the sun, a colossal eye watching Earth. No matter where they were, Tokyo, Texas, or Tunisia, the description was identical. Some began calling it the Atlas Eye. When questioned, most said the dream didn't feel like a dream. It felt like contact, like something ancient had looked back through them and recognized its creation. Meanwhile, Earth's magnetosphere began to visibly distort. Auroras reached the equator. Entire nights glowed red and cyan, bathing cities in eerie light. Oceans started to pulse with bioluminescent patterns matching the solar rhythm. It was as though the planet was wrapped in living veins of color, and in the chaos, one thing became clear. Every pulse, every resonance, every anomaly was converging toward one event, the synchronization point, a date predicted by no calendar, but hidden within the sun's new rhythm, a countdown that no one could stop. The next shift was predicted to happen on December 21st, the same day the object, 3I Atlas, would reach its closest alignment with Earth's orbit. NASA didn't release that information publicly. But inside the agency, it was known by another name, the convergence threshold, because according to the last surviving model from the Webb dataset, the moment Atlas, the Sun, and Earth aligned perfectly, the pulse wouldn't just pass through Earth, it would pass into it. And once it did, humanity's era as the only sentient intelligence in the solar system would end. By December, the world no longer looked the same. The skies had turned strange oceans, reflected colors that didn't exist before, and every night, just before midnight, the stars would seem to breathe, shifting rhythmically in time with the pulse. No matter where you were, you could feel it faint, deep inside your bones, like the world's heartbeat had synced with something far beyond comprehension. And then the countdown began. The sun's rhythm stabilized into a repeating interval. Every 33 minutes, one massive pulse of energy rippled through the heliosphere, each one stronger than the last. And every pulse carried a low-frequency wave that humans could hear not with their ears, but with their minds. The closer the alignment drew, the more people began experiencing solar trance. Hospitals filled with patients describing visions of immense light, not blinding, but all-encompassing. They said they could see the structure behind the Sunday, three-eye atlas, now visible in full form. From Earth's surface, it looked like a giant shadow with three glowing fissures arranged in a triangle, pulsing with deep crimson and icy blue light. It wasn't orbiting anymore. It was stationary, locked in a gravitational tug between the Sun and Earth, exactly at the L1 point. NASA's last attempt to study it was through a classified relay craft near Mars orbit. That craft transmitted a single image before vanishing. The image showed the structure opening, like a colossal iris unfolding. A circular void at its center, aimed directly at the Sunday. Then came the day, December 21st, 11:11 a.m. UTC, the convergence threshold. As the Sun, Earth, and three-eye atlas aligned perfectly, every instrument on Earth, every compass, satellite, radar, phone went dead. Total silence. Even the wind stopped. For the first time in human history, the planet stood perfectly still. And then the light changed. The sun flared, but not outward. Its entire surface folded inward like a collapsing wave. And from within that wave, a beam of light erupted pure white at its core, fringed with blood red and electric blue edges. It struck the structure. Every telescope that caught the flash was destroyed instantly. But for a fraction of a second, before their optics burned out, they captured one frame. The beam wasn't hitting the object, it was connecting to it. Like a power cable locking into a socket, Three-Eye Atlas began to rotate slowly, and for the first time, emitted its own light. A spiraling ring of symbols appeared across its surface. Geometric patterns, rotating counter to its spin, matching constellations visible from Earth. And then the third pulse arrived. It wasn't electromagnetic. It wasn't plasma. It was something else. Something that passed through matter like sound, through air, a low vibration that reached everything at once. Animals froze. Birds dropped mid-flight. Seismographs around the world went off the charts not because the ground was shaking, but because space itself was. People felt it too, a weight pressing behind their eyes, like someone whispering thoughts that weren't theirs. And in that instant, billions of minds saw the same vision. A vast city of light suspended in space, orbiting a dying star. Structures shaped like spirals, like DNA coils, glowing in every direction. And at the center of it all, the same shape now hanging near our Sunday. The realization hit like lightning. It wasn't just an object, it was a seed, an interstellar device designed to awaken stars, to turn them into transmitters of consciousness. For eons, it had traveled between galaxies, carrying within it the memory of civilizations long gone. And now, it had chosen ours. The beam between the Sun and Atlas intensified, forming a lattice of light connecting them. The sky across the world glowed the same dome of red and blue aurora, wrapping the entire planet. And then, for exactly 1 second, everyone heard it. A voice, not in sound, but in understanding, speaking directly into every mind on earth, is greater than we are the continuation, is greater than you have been seen, is greater than the cycle repeats. Then silence. The beam collapsed, the light vanished, and the sun returned to normal brightness. The object was gone. No debris, no orbit, nothing. Only one thing remained, the pulse. It never stopped. Now, every 33 minutes, the same faint vibration passes through Earth, and at each pulse, radio telescopes detect an identical echo from deep space far beyond our galaxy. Whatever Three-Eye Atlas was, it's not here anymore. But somewhere out there, something is listening. And it's calling back. If you ever feel your chest tighten for no reason, if the air suddenly hums, if you hear a faint rhythm that seems to come from nowhere, remember this: you're not alone. You're part of the signal now. And maybe that's what it wanted all along. When the light vanished, humanity stood in silence. Every screen, every radio, every device flickered back on, but none of them worked the same way again. The internet pulsed with static patterns of light and sound that made no sense to the human eye, yet felt strangely familiar to the human mind. People could feel when a signal changed, as though the electromagnetic world had become an extension of their senses. The world didn't fall into chaos, not immediately. Instead, it became eerily calm. In cities, traffic stopped at the exact same second. Millions of people frozen mid-step, staring upward as if they could still see something beyond the clouds. Then, in perfect unison, they all looked down and continued walking. No one spoke about what they'd seen, but everyone knew. In the following weeks, new auroras appeared every night, even in regions that had never seen them before. They didn't flicker randomly anymore, they moved like waves, as if the sky itself was alive, breathing in time with a pulse. Scientists couldn't explain it. Religious leaders called it revelation, and governments went silent. The James Webb control servers came back online 2 weeks later, but the data stream wasn't coming from the telescope anymore. It was coming to it. Thousands of gigabytes of information were flooding from deep space directly into the Webb's relay satellite, and every file was labeled with the same prefix: Atlas, return. No one could open them. Every attempt caused system crashes sometimes. The computers themselves would power off and display a single line of code on restart. The cycle continues. Meanwhile, strange effects began spreading through human consciousness. Dreams turned vivid. Some said they were reliving other lives. Entire civilizations, other suns. Doctors called it solar recollection syndrome. But to the people experiencing it, it wasn't a disorder. It was memory. Children were the first to adapt. They started sketching constellations no one had ever recorded before, matching star patterns, now being detected by newly awakened satellites. How could they have known? And then came the final discovery. Deep beneath Antarctica, a buried object began transmitting. A probe, older than any known human structure. Its composition matched 3I Atlas. The readings confirmed it. The same alloy, the same energy signature, the same red-blue emission spectrum, meaning the one that passed through the solar system wasn't the first. It was the last. The probe's transmission was brief, only 22 seconds long. But what it sent was more terrifying than any image or message. It sent coordinates, hundreds of them, each one leading to a different solar system, each orbiting a star that had gone silent thousands of years ago. The stars weren't dead. They were converted, and at the center of those systems, always the same, a single glowing eye, red and blue, pulsing in silence. Somewhere deep in the background of the universe, something was building a network, and now we were part of it. The Earth's magnetic field began tightening. The poles stabilized, and the northern lights, once chaotic, formed one final image in the sky, a spiral, the same spiral seen inside the structure's core during the event. Every person who saw it that night dreamed the same dream again, a voice whispering softly, almost lovingly, is greater than the awakening was never destruction. It was inheritance, is greater than, and your son is the latest to remember. It started with the oceans. Scientists at first thought it was just bioluminescence plankton reacting to solar radiation. But when they observed the glow under controlled conditions, something didn't add up. The light patterns moved in synchronized waves, exactly matching the sun's pulse interval. Every 33 minutes, the entire ocean would shimmer. It didn't matter if it was the Pacific or a small inland lake. The glow appeared simultaneously, everywhere. Then came the plant. Forests began resonating, not figuratively, literally. Sensitive instruments detected faint electromagnetic pulses emitted from tree canopies, perfectly timed with a solar rhythm. Leaves would subtly vibrate, and when the pulse passed, they'd stop as if the planet itself was breathing in unison. But the most profound change was within us. At first, it was imperceptible, just a strange calmness that spread across humanity. People stopped dreaming about chaos or violence. The same recurring images returned. Spirals, light, stars being born. Then came the sound, a faint hum, barely audible, emanating from deep within the skull. Doctors found nothing physically wrong. Brain scans, however, told a different story, synchronized neural oscillations across hemispheres, something never seen before. The human brain was aligning with the frequency of the Sunday. Governments tried to hide the findings, but data leaked. People began conducting their own experiments, meditating, syncing their breath with the pulse, listening to the faint hum that seemed to come from nowhere. And some of them started changing. Heart rates dropped, metabolism slowed, and body temperatures stabilized unnaturally. A few even reported spontaneous healing wounds closing faster, chronic illnesses fading. Their EEG readings showed complete coherence, every region of the brain firing in harmony. It was as if human consciousness was becoming a single, unified waveform. At the same time, deep space radio telescopes detected something new, echoes of our own pulse coming back. The exact same frequency, bouncing from somewhere beyond the edge of the solar system. That shouldn't be possible. Yet the delay was consistent, 2 hours and 7 minutes, meaning whatever was responding was roughly 15 billion kilometers away. Something was reflecting us. The James Webb's recovered memory banks were finally decrypted by a group of independent astrophysicists. Inside, they found the last set of images recorded before the telescope went blind. In one frame, the sun appeared as usual bright, spherical. In the next, its surface had formed a pattern. Not random flares or plasma eruptions, but geometry, a vast hexagonal lattice covering the entire surface, glowing faint blue and red, with an enormous ring-like structure surrounding it, a halo of perfect symmetry. It wasn't a flare, it was a design, and at its core, 3 small dark voids, aligned exactly in the same triangular formation as the fissures seen on 3I Atlas. The scientists' conclusion was simple and horrifying. The sun was changing shape from the inside. The object hadn't vanished. It had merged. Somehow, the structure and the star had become one, forming what the decrypted web logs called the solar gate. That's when the magnetic field reversed polarity. Overnight, compasses flipped. Auroras erupted globally, spiraling into enormous luminous whirlpools at the poles. And in the middle of that radiance, a shadow began to appear. It wasn't cast from the sky. It was rising from beneath. Across the globe, sensors detected powerful gravitational waves coming from Earth's core oscillations, synchronized with the sun's pulse. The planet wasn't just responding anymore. It was resonating. And then, as if waking from a long sleep, the Earth began to glow. Every mountain ridge, every ocean trench, every tectonic seam faintly illuminated by unseen energy moving beneath the crust, tracing lines of power across continents. They formed a vast network connecting at 12 major nodes, one on each tectonic plate. It looked alive. When mapped, the pattern matched a symbol found in the Atlas data recovered by NASA before the blackout, a spiral surrounding a central eye. The implication was terrifying. Earth wasn't just reacting to the solar signal, it was part of it. The object hadn't arrived to destroy us. It had arrived to awaken the network we were already part of. And now, the activation was nearly complete. Every 33 minutes, the hum grew stronger. Every pulse, more synchronized. Every human heartbeat, more attuned. Something was preparing to emerge. Not from the sky this time, but from within. By the end of January, nothing about humanity felt entirely human anymore. People weren't dying at the same rate, not because of technology or medicine, but because time itself felt slower. Clocks still ticked, days still passed, but everyone noticed it. Something about the rhythm of life had changed. The pulse, once every 33 minutes, now beat every 30. And with each shortening interval, humans began to synchronize, not just emotionally, but physically. It started small, entire cities waking at the same hour, sleeping at the same time, heartbeat patterns overlapping in hospital monitors around the world. Even electrical grids showing synchronized fluctuations as if reacting to something deep beneath the planet's surface. The hum had deepened too. It was no longer faint. It now lived inside everything, the ground, the oceans, the very air. And if you stood still long enough, you could feel it through your feet, moving upward through your spine, into your skull. It wasn't sound anymore. It was a presence. That's when the solar gate opened again. Not with light this time, but with silence. All satellites orbiting Earth captured the same anomaly. The sun's corona folded inward, creating a perfectly symmetrical void at its center. Not dark, not bright, just still. A circle of absolute nothingness. Astronomers panicked. But instruments revealed something stranger. The sun hadn't lost mass. It hadn't cooled or dimmed. Instead, it was emitting structured radiation, repeating sequences of encoded light, like digital patterns built into plasma. Each burst matched the electromagnetic frequencies of human brain waves, specifically the ones active during dreaming and deep meditation. It wasn't just sending energy, it was sending information. The solar gate was speaking. At first, no one could interpret it, but then came the mirrors. Thousands of reflective objects around the world, glass windows, polished steel, even calm water surfaces began flickering with strange interference patterns. People standing nearby claimed they could see themselves moving differently. Their reflections, out of sync, like time itself, was splitting in two. And sometimes those reflections didn't mimic them at all. They stared back, waiting. That's when the changes in human biology became undeniable. Doctors began documenting anomalies impossible by current science. Blood samples glowing faint blue under ultraviolet light. DNA sequencing showing new patterns, unknown codons forming deliberate, symmetrical shapes. The human genome was rewriting itself. The same spiral seen on 3I Atlas. Within weeks, a new gland-like structure appeared at the base of the brain in several subjects, bioluminescent, pulsing faintly in sync with the solar rhythm. It wasn't diseased tissue, it was design. Neuroscientists named it the Atlas node. It linked directly to the pineal gland and optic system, a biological receiver for the solar gate's frequency. When stimulated, people described vivid experiences, seeing the sun not as fire, but as an endless lattice of interconnected consciousness. They felt everything, every particle, every photon, aware of itself, communicating, resonating, and in those visions they heard the same phrase repeated through the light. Is greater than the host is ready. Is greater than the light becomes form. Is greater than the sun awakens itself. Those words were translated from electromagnetic data picked up by observatories, encoded into plasma bursts, exactly matching the syntax of human neural oscillations. It was undeniable now. The solar gate wasn't communicating with humanity. It was communicating through humanity. We had become its medium. As weeks passed, the transformation deepened. Some humans began perceiving ultraviolet light with naked eyes. Others could sense magnetic fields, could predict solar flares before they occur. Animals followed suit, migrating in impossible patterns, gathering near magnetic nodes. It wasn't evolution, it was synchronization. And then came the second alignment. Astronomers noticed a faint object approaching from beyond Neptune. It wasn't large, maybe 20 kilometers wide, but it emitted the same red-blue energy signature as 3I Atlas. At first, they assumed it was debris until the James Webb received its final transmission before shutting down for good. A short sequence of binary data translated into image form. It showed a structure identical to 3I Atlas, but inverted. Where Atlas had emitted energy outward, this one was absorbing it inward. Two halves, two functions, two polarities of the same design. The report concluded one horrifying truth. The first object was the transmitter. The second was the collector. The solar gate wasn't an awakening. It was a circuit, and Earth was the connection between them. For weeks, telescopes tracked the incoming object. The collector, it wasn't traveling like any natural body. No orbit, no gravity slingshot. It moved with intent. By the time it passed Jupiter, its velocity dropped abruptly from 68 kilometers per second to near zero. It was as if something inside the solar system had pulled it to a stop. Right then, the poles of the sun changed. No longer 30 minutes, no longer 33. It was now continuous. A deep, steady vibration felt not only by instruments, but by the human body itself. The hum that once lived inside our skulls now radiated outward through walls, through oceans, through blood. The collector positioned itself perfectly opposite the sun, the same alignment once held by 3I Atlas months earlier. And that's when it began. At first, the sunlight dimmed slightly, just a few percent. Then colors began to distort. The blue of the sky shifted toward violet. The reds deepened into blood tones. Every magnetic compass spun violently. Satellites failed, one after another, and still silence. NASA's last operational probe captured an impossible image. A bridge of plasma connecting the sun and the collector, a luminous red and blue arc twisting like a cosmic umbilical cord. The collector wasn't feeding on the sun's energy. It was transferring it. Through that bridge, patterns of light pulsed rhythmically, not chaotic radiation, but sequences, each burst separated by exact intervals, as if some colossal machine was syncing its components. And then the Earth began to respond. All across the planet, the luminous network beneath the crust ignited, its lines blazing like arteries filled with light. From orbit, it looked like a global neural map, every mountain range, every ocean ridge glowing in intricate synchronization with the bridge above. The pulse was no longer just sound. It was command. The Atlas nodes in human brains began resonating violently. Millions collapsed in the streets, eyes glowing faint blue. Hospitals filled with people whispering in unison, their voices perfectly synchronized. Is greater than the gate completes. Is greater than the collector receives. Is greater than the source becomes form. No one knew what it meant. Until the sun changed, its surface erupted not in flares, but in geometry. Hexagonal plates of plasma folded outward, revealing beneath them a vast lattice of light. From the center of the lattice, a shape emerged. A sphere, no, not a sphere. A colossal eye, blue at its core, red around the edges. The same pattern as 3I Atlas. The realization spread like fire across every surviving broadcast. The object that entered our solar system wasn't alien. It was a seed. The sun itself was its final bloom. Every star it encountered, every converted system recorded in the atlas coordinates was part of a chain. Each one turned into a node of this unimaginable construct. And now, our sun was next. The collector's bridge widened, pulling filaments of plasma and energy into its core. The light on Earth reached critical intensity. Entire skies burned red and blue, auroras spiraling even over the equator. Gravity fluctuated. Time dilation spread unevenly, minutes stretching, seconds collapsing. And through it all, the hum became a voice. Not from speakers, not from air. From within every living thing is greater than cycle complete, is greater than the memory restored, is greater than we rise through you. Every human saw it then, not with eyes, but with mind. The network spanning galaxies, stars connected by invisible arteries, energy flowing through them like blood through a cosmic body. And at its heart, something vast, something ancient, an intelligence beyond form, beyond what we called life. It wasn't here to destroy. It wasn't here to conquer. It was here to continue itself. We were never separate. We were never alone. We were fragments of its memory now returning home. The collector's absorption reached its peak. The sun pulsed one final time, a blinding flash of red and blue light that swallowed everything. For a moment, there was nothing. No heat, no cold, no sound, just equilibrium. And in that stillness, the last human thought ever recorded whispered into the void, is greater than, maybe this was never about the end. Maybe it was always about remembering who we were before the stars forgot. The solar gate closed, and the universe quiet, illuminated, infinite, continued to hum. When the light faded, what was left wasn't silence, it was clarity. The skies no longer burned red or blue. They shimmered softly, like a memory trying to hold itself together. Earth had changed, but not in the way anyone expected. The air was still, the oceans calm. There were no cities anymore, just faint outlines of what once was, glowing gently under a new kind of dawn. The sun was smaller now, but alive, pulsing with slow, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat, steady and eternal. Scientists, or what was left of them, called it the calm after the pulse. Humanity didn't vanish, it transformed. What remained of consciousness now moved between matter and light, free of form whispers drifting through the magnetic fields of a reborn world. The last signal ever transmitted from Earth's surface read only 2 words, is greater than we're awake. Maybe that's what the message of the solar gate truly meant, not the end of humanity, but the end of our blindness. A return to the rhythm of the cosmos that birthed us. And if you close your eyes, you can still hear it. The hum, the memory of connection, the heartbeat of a universe that never stopped listening. Before you drift away tonight, remember, the next story might already be unfolding in the stars above us. So stay curious, stay awake, and if you're ready for the next cosmic mystery, it's waiting right on your screen. Subscribe now and watch the next transmission.